Mhm. All righty. Welcome to Hello Chaos. It is the weekly podcast exploring the messy and chaotic minds and lives of founders, entrepreneurs, and innovators. Hello Chaos is one of the many resources brought to you by Orange Whip. That's Orange Whip, WIP, for work in progress. Orange Whip is a multimedia company dedicated to serving founders and entrepreneurs in affiliate cities through hyper-local media platforms that are designed to inform, inspire, encourage, and create connections to help founders along their journey. We tell real, raw, unbiased stories, and why our mantra is where aha meets oh shit. Orange Whip is an all in one content hub for founders with fresh and engaging stories, curated calendars, local calendars, and curated local resource directories. We've done all the hard work for founders, so all they need to do is go to this one trusted source in their local market to find all the information they need. My name is Jennifer Sutton. My friends and family call me JJ. I am the founder of Orange Whip and your podcast host today. We record live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So for those that are with us live, welcome. And then we publish on all podcast platforms on this coming Sunday. This episode is sponsored by Worksby. Worksby is the gold standard in virtual administrative solutions. Their energetic leadership team is committed to solutions that are agile, collaborative, and accessible so you can find the strategic answers you've been seeking, especially if you're a founder. They are narrow and deep in the administrative professional space and help craft the next generation of servant leaders and support executives. They help founders do what they love and take the tasks off their plate that they hate. Learn more at worksbee.com. That's WORXBEE.com. On our podcast today, we welcome Joanna Reese, founder of Tangible Agency. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome to our 64th episode.
Woohoo!
Yeah, woohoo. I know.
Yeah.
Kristen's like, what? 64?
I was 63rd. My bad.
Well, welcome. Well, why don't you start out? Tell us about your founder and entrepreneurial journey. Well,
Sure. Let's see. So I have always been a fast-paced person. And so when I tell my entrepreneurial story, I usually start a few years before to kind of give context. So basically I graduated high school at 17, a year early, and then I did my first degree in 3 years and started a corporate job all by the time I was 20, and then got married.
wow.
So it was, yeah, we were, and then when I was around 20 years old, actually my husband and I decided to basically start doing marketing consulting on the side while working our corporate careers, doing it for friends and family. And then while doing that,
was your degree in marketing? Is that what you got and the job you were working on in corporate? Were you a, in-house marketing person?
So my degree was actually, it's an interdisciplinary degree where the program I was in kind of self-design. I did business, marketing, and Spanish for a 3-part degree, and basically kind of created almost like an international business and marketing degree.
Yeah.
And then after I finished that, started an MBA program right away. My corporate job was with Verizon Wireless.
Okay.
And it was basically an apprenticeship. They picked 30 people across the country. And it was in 2 years, you were going to start from entry, and by the end of 2 years, be trained employees to be into like executive leadership.
Okay.
So I got this right out of college, started there. And by the end of those 2 years was more certain than ever that I did not want a corporate career. Every time I thought about quitting, they would just add another, bonus, another zero. And so it was one of those kind of spirals. But during that time, kind of knew, like, I definitely don't want this. I would love more freedom. I love to travel, all the different things. And so we talked about, let's set a 20-year plan. In 20 years, we will open our own marketing agency.
Okay.
And so
Well, why marketing?
we both loved it. So my husband, his degrees were in creative writing, journalism, and design.
Okay.
But mine with math, and we're both math brains. So just a lot of overlap, and we realized we complement each other well. When we were working with family and friends, it was very often they would tell us the issue, and immediately my brain's strategic minded, so it would start asking lots of questions and getting a full scope and being able to figure out, okay, this is all you need to do.
Right.
And my husband being the one who knew how to do any and everything in the tech world. He's a developer by, I guess, trade.
Okay.
And so he's very tech savvy. And so between the two of us, me with strategy and him with the tech savvy, we were able to just kind of do it as a duo for a little while. But then in 2015, we decided to move from North Carolina down to Greenville and to decide to start pushing towards that 20-year goal, even though it had only been probably 3 years of doing it on the side. And so in 2015, when we decided to come down here, I took a sales job just to kind of get to know people because we didn't know anyone in the area.
Right.
But within 6 months, had accidentally went from a 20-year plan till a right now plan. I think it kind of all came to head in November 2015, December, around that time, we closed, I think, $20,000 of projects for the two of us. And I said, well, it looks like I don't have time to do sales anymore. We're doing this. So by January, we had already hired our first employee, and it just kind of began to blossom from there. But for me, after that initial launch and kind of like excitement of, oh, we're doing this for real. We kind of went into, if you know business growth cycles, this is kind of the way I realized it now in retrospect during the MBA program. Wendell kind of poked me and had a realization. That existence phase is stage one, when you just kind of come out of the box and you're figuring out what to do.
Right.
That was kind of more of our duo period. The survival phase was 2015 when we got our first office and really began to hire and scale. And we kind of thought, all right, we'll get to that success phase here pretty quick. And then it did not happen. We stayed in survival for, it felt like an eternity. In retrospect, it probably wasn't that long, but we were working way too many hours, more than I worked in corporate, which was a lot, and making less by a lot. And so we're hard-headed, though. We never gave up. And eventually around 2020, we had gotten to a place where, or 2019, it had gotten to a place where even with just one of us working, it supplied for our family and everything. But I had kind of begun to lose interest almost because I was starting to get tied into a nonprofit I was founding and a lot of other things. And 2020 hit, and while most businesses in the marketing field seem to be shutting down, we could not keep up. Our business tripled revenue year over year. And that was in the midst of founding the nonprofit. And so I was moving overseas temporarily. So 2020 was a year of chaos. But it really pushed us from survival to success and going, okay, now we're scaling, we're getting to work ahead and hire for a job we're about to need instead of, us scrambling until we could afford it. And so that's a pretty good place. And that's when I went into the MBA program going, okay, things are working, let's do this.
And for our listeners that might not be, this is the chamber, the Greenville Chamber, which is a statewide kind of program for Greenville, Columbia, and Charleston, but it's the Minority Business Accelerator initiative that they have, and,
which I cannot recommend highly enough.
Yeah. I was a graduate of that program in 2018, so
perfect.
I recommend it a lot.
Yes.
So let's back up a little bit, just so you founded in 2020. You founded a nonprofit.
I did. Yes.
Well, what is that?
So that I have a lot of interests, I would say, but I was actually like kind of born and part-time raised overseas in Honduras. And around 2018 and 19, I had 4 different women I knew there reach out struggling because they were dealing with domestic violence or had a friend who was. And there's no shelters, there's no homeless shelters, there's no women's nonprofits like that really in existence. And so I kind of had the idea of basically when in setting up, creating a curriculum and a system to teach women in those situations, life skills, nutrition, finance, budgeting, and then business skills. And then to show them during that year, it's a year-long curriculum, basically a bunch of different artists and crafts and helping them kind of launch their own businesses. And that way they're able to provide for their kids and make their own decisions.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
so you're running the agency in 2020 and it's taken off like crazy.
Yeah.
And then you're also trying to start an overseas nonprofit.
Yes. So in early 2020, before the pandemic, we had decided Tangible's in a good enough place that we could run it from anywhere and not impact any of our clients negatively. So we, as a family, we have 3 kids, sold everything we owned in January 2020. And we're staying in a Airbnb up till our departure in May to move to Honduras for the year or 2.
Oh,
and then
did that get
all
canceled?
the borders shut down.
Oh.
So we were stuck and we were migratory for a few months, but we eventually got there, got everything launched, and we moved back in June 2022.
Wow. So
I applied for MBA a few months later, and here we are.
Wow. So you've got 2 kind of, you got a nonprofit, you've got the agency. What has been the most rewarding aspect of your journey?
Probably, it really probably goes back to people, whether it's employees. I also, whether it was, I don't know. I just think that when I know that something I'm doing is making someone's life better, different, more impactful, that matters to me. I just feel like things that are sustainable, that I can do something today and for 20 years, this person's life is going to be different and better, or a whole culture shift. Those things are the way kind of my brain works. And so really, no matter what I'm doing, it seems to kind of all connect back to that with my nonprofit, the women there, with our team at Tangible. I love hiring people who are often overlooked by corporations and big agencies that are quirky or weird or sometimes inexperienced, but have the right personality, the passion, the drive, and potential. And so those are my favorite hires. Even Kiko, who's now moving in as partner with Tangible this year, when we hired him, had no direct marketing experience. He had run his own photography business for years and worked in business management, but never in an agency. And we kind of fast tracked him, and he's been under kind of a mentor with me. And so after a couple of years, he's running the thing.
Wow. Wow. So that's kind of your shift of scalability as he's going to start doing the operations. Is that right?
Yes. So my toxic trait is that I love both complete structure and control and complete chaos, but almost nothing in between. And so now in retrospect, I've learned, I didn't know till I was 30, but I'm autistic and I have ADHD. Was not diagnosed until I was 30.
Wow. How did you, what was that process like? You were like, went online, did a test, and you're like, whoa, I'm like,
no, actually,
how did you uncover this?
So I have 3 kids. My middle child was struggling with some things, and we were beginning to seek supports and try to figure out what was going on. And as I was kind of doing some surveys for him with the doctor and talking about kind of the difficulties in school or social settings, I filled out a form and I was like, oh yeah, his is completely normal on this form. It's exactly normal. And they're like, what do you mean normal? I was like, it's identical as what I would have put. And they were like, surprise, it's not normal. So it was kind of an accidental diagnosis. And then working with therapists and psychologists, kind of unpacking oh my gosh, it all makes so much sense now. So I have ADHD and autism. The autism piece wants everything in structures and boxes and controlled systems, right. Where my ADHD self functions in just complete chaos. And I think that's why I've been very successful in juggling the founder life, is being able to hyper focus and also disconnect and find that balance. But I realized during the MBA program, actually, Wendell had asked us to read an article called Why Entrepreneurs Don't Scale.
Right.
It changed my life.
How so? How so?
So it talked about how the most successful entrepreneurs and startups and founders, typically they had done research and found like what are the skills these people always have that make them good entrepreneurs and versus burning out in the first 1 to 3 years, which is 90%.
That's right.
And they found it was 4 key things. And then they looked at CEOs, executives that are scaling companies and said, what are their 4 things? And a lot of them were inverse. You have to completely flip the skill upside down. And with all my years of business books and blogs and podcasts and classes and degrees, that's something I'd never heard worded that simply and directly.
Right.
And it was like, oh my gosh, that's the missing piece. So because with an entrepreneur, for example, task orientation, so being able to just hyper focus on a task and get it done, working in isolation, single-mindedness, meaning being able to make a decision and stick to it. And then the last one being loyalty to comrades, which my MBA class had nicknamed me Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
Because I have a tendency to be overly loyal, I would say, or not as business-minded when I get cluttered with the personal piece sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, and then just kind of learning about how all these things that I had been an extremist on one side, I can flip it to the other end and be the CEO and be really successful it is just kind of that choice of flipping. Being autistic, I'm an extremist, so I tend to do really good on both ends of the spectrum. And so I realized, okay, if I'm going to be able to flip that off and instead be open-minded and working in a collaborative and not being tasked, but big picture oriented and putting the business ahead of personal interests and some of those things, I need somebody else who does the balance on the other end.
Right.
I wasn't able to, in those survival years, to kind of do the CEO and the founder. And some people can do both. It wasn't me. I was one or the other.
Right.
And Kiko come in, has filled that first role really well. And so right now we kind of have that balance where I'm thinking big picture and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have these great ideas. And instead of them just putting on a back shelf, I'm like, let's do them. And he's able to balance me with like, hey, we're onboarding 4 clients. Let's do that next month.
Right. Yeah. Cause now you get to work on the business versus you're really in the business, which is what they try to train and teach in the program of how do you do that? How do you mentally shift? And how do you do it physically?
Yeah. And that was my thing, is that when I realized these pieces, I have them right in front of me. And now it's just, I just need to flip the switch. It was like, oh my gosh, that I can do that.
Right.
It's really exciting. I remember kind of that day, I remember calling like 4 of my friends, my husband, my sister, and being like, listen, I know some.
You're like relief. So how do you deal and how have you dealt with all the stress of, like you said, 2020, huge kind of like stress, chaos year. How did you deal with that stress and that huge challenge that you faced?
Whew. Honestly, 2020 was probably one of what I would call like a high year of my life, of just like feeling like everything was going perfectly to plan, because again, I thrive in chaos.
Right.
I think for me that it didn't feel overwhelming. I'm really good at kind of stepping up into that. Is when things are slowing down that I get nervous.
Okay.
And that's something I've realized is like this past July, when it was public that Kiko was stepping as partner and a lot of the pieces kind of fell off my plate. I was kind of anxious for a month going, is there anything on fire? Like, what's going on? And everything seems fine.
What do you think has been the greatest aha moment across your journey in building these businesses?
I think I've had a lot of ahas. That article, the flipping the switches and doing the extreme opposite, was a big one. But I also think just realizing I was that person in high school who, when the teacher says pick 3 people for a group project, I'm like, I'll do it solo. I'm good. And I was valedictorian and I made straight A's and I was good at this stuff, but I kept believing that if I did my work good enough, I would never really need to do group projects or rely on others growing up throughout high school and even through college. And getting into the real world and realizing how much value there is in establishing a really collaborative team that can challenge you in areas and push things and see blind spots. For me, I think that has been just something I wouldn't have known as a kid, really starting a business. When
Right.
I'm like, oh, me and my husband have got this, we'll never need a team. And then very quickly needed a whole team. Um,
Like, we cannot do this alone.
it is too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just kind of realizing that I love the human aspect, but it almost didn't feel like it was productive or functional. And I know part of that probably goes back to the autism I didn't know I had. Um, but now having learned to better communicate and ask people for feedback and those kind of things has just made it where, I think watching how much that impacts and how much better the quality our deliverables are to clients, how much better the strategies come together when it's collaborative versus just one person. And I think to me, the personal component, realizing how vital that is.
Yeah. I think that's usually as we're building teams and, I've told this story before when I worked at an agency and I had, 50, 60 people that reported to me. When you're working under somebody else's brand, it's really easy to, you feel like you got that, you're empowered, you've got the authority and the engagement. It was a big shift for me when I founded my own agency and trying to build my own team of, oh my God, I am accountable and
Yeah.
responsible for every one of these people's actions. Um, and that was a big mental shift for me. Did you have any of that, like coming
Ooh,
from like a large, a bigger brand, and then now you're developing people under your own brand that have to represent you? Was that challenging for you at all?
very, very. Again, as hyper empathetic aligns with autism,
Yeah.
I constantly carried that burden, probably definitely to an unhealthy extreme at
Mm.
times where if we lost a big client or if there was something happening financially, in my mind, I would never want my employees to be negatively impacted by something that they couldn't have controlled or it
Right.
wasn't their fault. And so for years, almost to the toxic point that I would, if we lost a client, it just meant that my paycheck went down and
Mhm.
nobody else would be impacted. And that was pretty much, I mean, if there was a slow period, everyone's still getting their full paycheck except for me.
Yep. Oh, I've
And
been there. Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and definitely where there was periods where I'm going, "Oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna have enough to pay my bills this month," and my team's going, "Oh, let's go out for a team lunch for," and I'm going, "Okay." So, I definitely feel like when you realize every card swipe and every commitment you make, people are coming back to me. The
Mhm.
employees may or may not be there, but if my company has promised to deliver something, we have to deliver it or they're wanting to talk to me.
Right.
And so, yeah, I definitely
Or if
think
somebody screws up, it's on you ultimately.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
if an employee makes a mistake, it absolutely, and I have always had exceptionally high standards with our team, and I think I've learned over the years how to, um, help set those expectations early on
Mm.
and rarely have issues, but yeah, definitely that when I get that message that's like, "Hey, boss, sorry, I messed up. I completely forgot about this." And it's like, dang it, so definitely that piece is very different. Back in corporate, things also felt more abstract. When you're working in a corporation, you're not, even if you run budgets and set goals, it's different. It's different
Mhm.
when it's for someone else's money and it's
That's
almost
right.
it's like monopoly money when you're in
It
a
is.
corporation.
Yeah.
Sure, we'll throw a 500,000 here, whatever. But when it's your business, yeah, even a $500 expense is like, but what is that for?
Right.
And it makes you shift. It certainly, I think having two extreme experiences as well of like a startup with when we started, it was, I mean, really, we didn't start with any funds, any connections. We had no anybody in the area. It was starting from the ground up. And I also underestimated the old adage of it's not about what you know, it's who you know.
Mhm.
And I certainly
Mhm.
underestimated that for a few years.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How'd you overcome that?
So again, I put on the strategy hat. We had a few bids go out, And we were able to see we were lower priced than a competitor that we knew we did higher quality work than, and then didn't win the contract on 2 or 3 occasions. And I finally followed up and asked someone, and they said, honestly, we don't even look at work profiles. We just ask our people. And that was when I was like, oh my gosh. So it's literally, the whole thing is true, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the quality and other things matter, but to get in the door, it's who you know. And so I basically said our whole agency's marketing budget for ourselves, 100% of that is going into developing our network. So we established something called Greenville Connect back in 2017. And all the way until 2020 shut us down, we did monthly networking events open to the community. One of my hobbies is charcuterie boards back before they were a trend. So every month, basically, we would make this master charcuterie board for 100 people, have wine, beer, and invite a industry specialist to come and give a 10-minute talk and then have open networking. And so every month we were having hundreds of people come in the room. And that event just, I mean, it was wild how much it took off and grew. Yeah. And really that just kind of got it where as soon as I got in the room with people and they kind of realized what our specialties were and how we worked and who we are, the walls just came down and people were like, all right, let's give it a try. Let's see what you got.
Right.
And at this point, since 2020, I don't think we've spent really any real money on our marketing. It's just ever since we did that, it kind of enough people.
It's just word of mouth. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's your biggest like, oh crap, oh shit moment?
Dang, there's so many to pick from. Yeah, I think in the very, very early stages, one of the first employees we hired was at a different marketing agency in town, a big agency. And that is honestly the reason I wanted to hire her. It was like, me and Anthony could probably handle all the load, but I want someone who's done this before because we accidentally opened a marketing agency on our 20-year plan in 4 years. And I don't know what I'm doing. And it was like, I know strategy and I can figure out anything and I have all the concepts, but like, what does that practically play out in a small business?
Right.
And so we hired her specifically for that. And that was a big learning lesson of just realizing now in retrospect, I think we tried to kind of like fit into an agency template in certain areas. But eventually realized that's not ever who we want to be. We don't want to be the typical agency. We don't want to follow the norms. And more as we quit trying to be what we thought we needed to be, that I guess a lot of that, just the insecurities of like other agencies are doing it. So I guess we need to, as soon as we were like, all right, we're just going to do it this way. It makes sense to us. This seems best. Let's see what happens. We just had so many clients who would tell us after having worked with marketing agencies, you are a breath of fresh air. You guys just get things done. We can rely on it and there's no, fluff. And so it was like, okay. And so I think early on, a lot of times founders, whatever industry they will try to copy or try to duplicate because it feels easier. It's less fearful. But I think at this point, anytime we hit a bump, instead of Googling what do other people do, I go into a brainstorming session with my team because it's like, oh, this is an opportunity. If we're having this problem, everyone else is too. And most people Google it and just do what everyone else is doing, which is usually not the best case. And so all the way back to, we don't know anyone in this town. What do? Let's just know everyone. Let's make an event that everybody matters will come to. And so that's what we did. And I think, that's the takeaway, I guess, is just if you're launching a business, leaning into the single-mindedness piece of an entrepreneur.
Like who you are, like what's your value proposition, right?
Yeah, why did people start? Why did we sign $20,000 of contracts in a month? And it wasn't because I had an agency experience or an agency pitch or anything like an agency. It's because they trusted that I could personally, with who I am, deliver good products and help them. And so as soon as I got back to that, it was like, okay, that's what we want to do.
Okay. If you could hit rewind, is there anything you would do differently?
Certainly. Yeah, I think mainly around those early years when we were stuck in survival for so long. I think we were stuck because we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right.
And so as someone who struggles ever asking for help on anything, certainly just going into a community where I don't even know anyone and saying, hey, who wants to help me with my business felt
Right.
insane. And I think now, having been in business for 12 years, it's like, oh, actually, that's very simple. And there's actually so many organizations and volunteers and opportunities and places that want to do that. And so I think that's my thing now, is when I meet a founder or a startup person who's kind of just kicking the tires, I'm like, you need to sign up for this or this, or, where
Right. Go seek advice, find your community.
right. There's the chamber, there's SCORE, the mentors. I mean, there's so many programs.
SBDC has one in every market.
And a lot of people, I think, get intimidated out of going to those, but it's like, it is made
I
for
was.
them. Yeah, me too.
I mean, I've talked to people when I first started my marketing agency back in 2013, coming out of, big, large agencies. I was like, oh, I didn't know who these, like, the scores, or if I heard about them, I'm like, I don't know, do I fit their model? And now it's like, I look back and go, what was I so afraid of?
Yeah.
Like,
well, and I
silly.
hear constantly that exact things is more prominent for women, minorities, but really for any founder, you got some of do I really know what I'm doing? There's always going to be some of that in there. That's
oh yeah.
And I think especially in my early days, I was so worried about that I basically gave a money back guarantee to any client we had. That it was like, if I can't deliver what I think I can, I will refund all my time. You won't pay it if I don't do it. And never had anyone ever take us up on it. There was one time I said I didn't think I had hit, and they were like, you did above and beyond what I wanted, but I'm me, and as an autistic Enneagram 8, I was like, no, I said I wanted this goal, and we only did 90% of that, so I'm refunding your payment. And they're like, okay. So again, in retrospect, there was things that it was like I needed to prove it to myself.
Yeah.
To clients. And I think if I had just come in and been able to say, like, I know I can do a good job at this, it would have been so much better for everybody.
I know, the confidence, like, we need to get better at knowing ourselves and believing in ourselves. It's a female founder issue. It's like we struggle with that.
And I will give a shout out then to therapy. Honestly, in those early days, therapy wasn't common, but having gone to therapy made me a better business owner. It made me a better employer, a boss, the way I interact with my team, my clients. And I feel like learning about myself built the confidence, but it also built just skills that of blind spots. And everybody has those blind spots.
Right. If you could pick two things that you could change about your business today, what would they be?
Ooh. So we're currently in a scale up period. As Kiko is kind of stepping in and I'm stepping into a different role, we're kind of shuffling a lot right now. I think if I could just change anything, one of our biggest swaps over the last year has been, with all my nonprofit experience, we never really targeted that world or went for it. And it was kind of like, why not?
Yeah.
So we swapped and decided back in January that would be a focus, and we've already picked up a few of my favorites in town to work with right off the bat. But I think I'm really excited about when we get to the point where it's kind of a 50-50 between for and nonprofit.
Right.
I just think the work with nonprofits is just a lot more encouraging and spirit filling. Yeah.
What advice, if you could give a couple pieces of advice to another founder, wherever they are in their journey, what advice would you give them?
Ask for help and read a lot, or podcast. I have.
Yeah, what are your favorites?
Yeah. Oh, well, yours is now one of my favorite. I will admit, until I through the MBA heard about it, didn't know about it, and have now been like going back and like binging them. I love this kind of thing when it's just picking people's minds. There's also one similar to this by a couple businesses in town. Designly, they make apps, but they also do a founder factor, and they covered. I think you may know because they covered Worksbe's founder.
Yeah.
And so I know you know her. And so there's this kind of a similar. Yeah, there's so many good ones. And I think for every founder, you need your own kind of like curated list of what's going to help you. there's new ones popping up all the time. So yeah, just
Are there
staying educated and
is
building.
there a go-to book or anything that you're like, "Oh my gosh, I love this book. This changed my world."
In the business world, no. In the personal world, sure. I have a lot of those. I don't know. In the business world, I think for me, there's never been one that completely revolutionized anything or like,
Mhm.
it's always for me, I work within the context, whether it's small business, nonprofit, growing business, corporation, it's so different what you need and what makes sense for an ROI. And so for me, I just like to be very eclectic and listen to as many smart people as I can. And I just feel like very often I'll get a little nugget that's like, ooh, and then 5 years later, a client will come up and I'm like, I know the answer. So I don't know. I feel like constantly just, and that's also me as a boss. My team probably gets so annoyed, but I'm like constantly like forwarding over articles or things. I'm like, read this, you won't believe it. And, or forwarding over, I'm like, can you do a deep dive and research this? And
Right. Right.
so we really stay on top of that.
Well, what keeps you up at night, Joanna? Like, do you have any stressful moments and you're like, "Okay, I cannot go to bed because I'm just struggling with this
Yeah,
answer or this question?"
good question. Right now, I think Kiko's the one staying up at night, which I love. But to be fair, so it's like I'm trying to put some boundaries between me and the business because I tend to
Hyper
do
focus.
it myself if
Mhm.
I'm involved. And so I'm like, all right, I'm gonna let you have this. Just keep me out of it unless you need me. And that actually came from advice from Robin Phillips. She had done a Passover, and so she was like, you've got to make sure you're giving yourself boundaries. And so that was probably the best advice I got this year. Because I definitely think that has made for such an easy transition. But every once in a while I'll just like wake up at 2 a.m. and be like, I wonder if he's messaged client X since last week or not, because I wasn't copied on the reply, but I told him not to copy me. And so
Yeah.
when I have those moments, I'll just text it to him and be like, did you message them?
Yeah.
And
Just
next morning,
checking. Yeah. Yeah. And Robin Phillips, just so our listeners know, she is a founder from Greenville that she started an agency called Brains on Fire that took off at, built it over 25 years and ended up exiting and selling her piece and her share. But it's one of the, it's a predominant agency here in town. They've got an office in LA and they have continued to grow. But luckily she is supporting other founders and we appreciate her
incredible.
advice.
Well, and I just as like a short little side bit on that, she has actually been, and you can probably find it in old blogs I've written and stuff. She's been what I called my marketing hero
Yeah.
since I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
I knew in high school I didn't think I was going to go into a marketing business. I thought I was going to open a business, which I still probably will, a restaurant at some point, but I began to follow Brains on Fire and their journey and their everything, and just obsessed with them all the way through, and have always followed that journey. And the MBA program partners the participants with their coaches.
Yeah.
And so we go in not having a clue who our coach will be. And I was still in that place kind of going, is this the right thing for me? Am I supposed to be in this program? And then I get the email that's like, by the way, your mentor is going to be Robin Phillips. And I just look at
and
my
you're
husband
like,
okay, thank you.
heavens aligned.
We're on the right path.
That's right. What do you do for your free time?
Ooh, there's very little of that. I have one in middle school, one in third grade, one in kindergarten.
Okay. So yeah, all under what? 12, 13 and under?
11 and under, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yep.
Yeah. Still do a lot of work with nonprofits. So the one I founded in Honduras, but also nonprofits in general, I love. So there's a lot that I volunteer with or things of that nature. Definitely traveling. This year, that's kind of our balance is once we put in those weeks of like 80 hours, then we give ourselves a vacation. So we've gone to New York, Boston, Paris, Amsterdam. So we try to balance our mental health with travel.
Now you mentioned restaurant. Does that mean you're a little foodie?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And what type of restaurants do you like? That's your go-to when you go into like a New York or a Boston.
Yeah.
Where do you guys go?
Everything. So sometimes me and my husband will travel solo. Sometimes we bring the 3 kids. Sometimes I'll go with my sister. So depending on the context changes. We went actually to Vegas a week ago and we went to, I can't remember the name at the moment. There's a reality TV show my sister's obsessed with about a restaurant owner. It has the middle name Van something, but we went to her restaurant. It's a Parisian restaurant inside of Caesar's Palace, and it was incredible. Just very. I love, as a marketing person, the experience that
Yeah.
it feels like you've stepped into a Parisian restaurant, and like all the presentations are just unbelievable. But I'm also that person who loves a good dive bar, or
Mm.
like, we found the best restaurant in New York City was a little mac and cheese place in the Bronx.
Oh, yum.
Me and my kids ate like $80 of mac and cheese, but they had 20 options and we had to try them all.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, what
That's
do
the
you
whole
do?
point when you go to a restaurant. You do a little sampler plate. Let's get stuff
You want everything
to
be-
share with the table, right?
Yes.
So if you look ahead 1 year from now, and you think ahead 1 year from now, what do you want your business to look like? Like, or the changes you'd like to see, whether is that a revenue goal, or is like, oh, we're X number of people today. I want to be X number of people, a year from now, or maybe different offices. Like,
Yeah.
when you look at a year, what would you like to see your business look like?
So yeah, and I'm not good at long deadlines. This year, the SGAP, I basically did all 3 years, all in 8 months or something. And so I'm not good at long-term goals. So I'm hoping by the end of next year, or this time next year, one, that I'm fully transitioned into development and not the day-to-day.
Okay.
First off,
So stepping out of the weeds and
yeah,
stepping into that more visionary.
which I've done, but
Well,
I
yeah.
still feel sometimes the pull back, and I'm
Well,
hoping
of
in a year
course.
it
Yeah.
will just be a
Takes a
very,
while for transition,
it
right?
does. So hopefully that will feel easier in a year. I also, based on our revenue and growth right now, expect we'll probably double our team size.
Hmm.
Right now I have kind of a specialist in each of the areas I need, which was really the hardest part of an agency from the ground up, is your first 4 or 5 employees to kind of build the baseline of specialists. And so now it's kind of like, ooh, we could get a second content person here to do this piece. And so I think just looking at the year ahead, I'm excited about being able to bring on more people. And what else would I need in a year? Oh, we would also like to be in an office of our own. So we
Okay.
have been at Venture X for years, and now we also
And
are
that's a
at,
co-work space, right?
yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
And then Railside Studios, we also have a couple offices. That's where I'm at right now. A couple
Yeah.
offices here today. So we're split. We have 3 desk offices situations and kind of migrate as needed. But we're looking to find a building that would be big enough to have all of the pieces of us.
Everybody together, right?
Yes. Everything's
That's
just been
fantastic.
not any great deals yet. We're hoping it'll find at the right time.
Awesome. Well, we are out of time, Joanna.
Yes. Oh my goodness, this flew by.
I know, that's what I was like. I say that every time. Kristen's like, "Are you going to say it again?" We're out of time. It always flies by. Like, I'm looking up, going, "Oh my gosh, I got to wrap." I'm always amazed how fast these go. They're so informative, and you know, everything that you've offered, and I mean, it's just great discussion. Appreciate you being on the show and enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for hanging out. And so before we go, how can people get a hold of you or connect with you, or Tangible? How do you want them to connect?
Yeah. So on the tangible side, tangible.agency is our website. We just rebranded last month. That was also part of my SGAP goals.
Okay.
And
What was
so
it for? You went from Tangible
we were Tangible Strategies
Strategies, and
since
then
2012, and we dropped Strategies and freshened up a very, 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 very outdated brand.
yeah.
And so the new website, Tangible Agency, or on social, Tangible Strategies. And then me personally on LinkedIn or Instagram is Joanna Reese 7.
Joanna Reese 7, and that is
And Reese is spelled like the Reese's cup.
like the Reese's cup. All right. And that's Joanna. So
Yes, with an A at the end, not Joanna.
Kristen, our producer's like, yes, get that A in. So for everyone listening or watching us live, thank you for joining us. Again, this podcast episode will be published this coming Sunday and available on all podcast platforms. So subscribe to Hello Chaos, like, comment, and share this great content so we can help grow and build a more connected entrepreneurial community. Hello Chaos is one of the many resources brought to you by Orange Whip. Orange Whip is a multimedia company dedicated to serving founders and entrepreneurs across affiliate cities. We are 100% free, just an email to join the community. It's a one-stop content hub just for founders, delivered in a weekly email, 2-minute read every Sunday. Get you prepped for the week. We are currently in 3 areas in South Carolina, the upstate, Midlands, and Low Country, with goals to expand to be in 30 cities in 5 years. So check out the new edition that we dropped this month. It's on highlighting minority business enterprises and women business enterprises in those 3 markets. So some great stories, great photography. Go subscribe and support us. Again, it's free. Just find your city edition and enjoy the content. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast or support us, head over to orangewhip.com. That's orangewip.com, or send an email to hello@orangewhip.com. And while you're there, again, subscribe. It's 100% free. Let's give a huge shout out to our podcast sponsor, Worksby. They are the gold standard in virtual administrative solutions. They have discovery calls that are free. They've got videos and podcasts and blogs that talk about, are you ready for a virtual assistant? How do they match, make, and pair? They've got a very data-oriented scientific method for pairing founders and entrepreneurs or executives with the right virtual executive assistant that they need. So just go over to Worksby, WORXBEE. How many E's did I say? WORXBEE.com, and find the content that you need and check it out. They take all the crap you hate off your plate and lets you be more productive. But y'all, thank you for tuning in to Hello Chaos this week. It's where aha meets oh shit. Again, I'm your host, Jennifer Sutton, JJ. We will see you again next week. Thank you.